This is a clip from the Canon podcast. To hear the full episode and get access to exclusive benefits, head over to patreon.com/thecannonpod and sign up for just £3 a month.
Erling Haaland, George. Is there a solution to Erling Haaland? Is he real?
Look, he is a footballer that I think is going to break a lot of not just records but perceptions about what we think the modern nine is going to be going into the future. You know, he's just he is really an outlier in himself. But you know, I think when you attempt to try to beat a giant of the game, by the way, I don't think you respond by necessarily having to have that giant. I am always a team collective. Growing up in the Arsene Wenger mold, I do value the team over an individual, and I think that while you could say that having all of your goals housed in one superstar that's guaranteed has a benefit, I think the other stat that you want to look at is how that Arsenal have almost 4 to 5 players with over 10 Premier League goals spread out, meaning that you're not predictable. When you look at some of the best teams, we always have a superstar, but the best teams, when you talk about the Invincibles, yes, Henry was our superstar king, but we still had Patrick Vieira, we still had Perez, we still had Freddie Ljungberg. We had a multitude of players that came apart in our success, and you know, Perez also kind of got player of the season. People forget about that in some of his biggest pomps. You know, it wasn't just a one-man show constantly, and some of our best teams have had that cohesive flexibility of threat. And I think that's really the big thing that you want to look for in future seasons.
I think when you look at Erling Haaland, though, as much as I love Gabriel Jesus and Eddie Nketiah, and I love our strikers, there is a sense of, I also want a bit of that. I want a bit of a goal-scoring machine. I want a bit of that one chance, one goal. And there is this debate in the Arsenal fan base right now. Should we sign a striker? Even though we've got Gabriel Jesus, even though we've scored so many goals. And I wouldn't say goal-scoring is a problem. I think next year it's all about evolving, taking the next step forwards. And in the Champions League, for example, you get a chance in a game, you need to kill the game off. If we miss that chance, there will be questions about should Arsenal sign a more clinical striker. So should Arsenal be proactive and sign a new centre forward? Alex, what are you thinking?
Yes. I think the people who are averse to that are what I call team sheet fans. People who like posting very clean 11s of here's how we will play every single game next season. We'll play with our Jesus will be our main number 9, and then underneath him you have Nketiah's name in a sort of slightly lighter colour, and then you have every single thing, and that's sorted, and my football team's going to be okay. I think it's ultimately a coping mechanism, I think. As we know, that's not how football works. And I think you have to, especially in the modern game, start to think about squads and profiles and minutes rather than first 11s and starts and that sort of stuff. That is the way things are going. That part of the reason, and we're always going to return to Man City because they're the benchmark, but part of the reason that Man City are where they are is because of their squad. They have 15, 16, 17 players who any of them could come in and there's no drop in the level. I believe we have 13. The 11 plus Tierney and plus Trossard and Tomiyasu, not Tierney. Beyond that, you start to adapt. You start to adapt too much from the football we've seen. So when we think about the forward group, to come to your question, we don't have the type of profile that City have in an Erling Haaland. Now, I don't believe we're going to be able to get that this summer. But what we can get is someone who, let's say, to use names, and again, names are for the scouts, right? But, you know, let me use a name. Benjamin Sesko from RB Leipzig or Evan Ferguson from Brighton. I believe there's a space in the squad for a tall, physical channel runner, someone who can pin centre-backs, someone who isn't going to necessarily drop in to receive off the first phase like Gabriel Jesus does, someone who isn't going to pop up at right back like Jesus does against West Ham, right? Someone who isn't going to do that, someone who's going to stay there, occupy centre-backs, be a presence in the box, and be someone who, as you say, Bhavs, one shot, one chance, one goal. You know, someone who is just absolutely clinical. There is space for that. And part of the reason I believe there is space for that, finally, is when you look at our forward group, the closest profile that we have to Saka on the right-hand side is Jesus. Progressive receptions, the ability to turn his man, the ability to roll his man. So I believe that Jesus is the perfect person to, let's say, 75 minutes into a Champions League game with a big game at the weekend in the Premier League, stick Jesus on the right, bring on our proper number 9, if we're calling him that, and take Saka off and rest him. And we will see that all over the pitch, and we can talk about other areas of the pitch. But we have to start thinking about groups and profiles and minutes rather than this person will start 38 league games. It's not going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, Alex has given us the names there, right? So he's given us the requirements. Now I need the names, George. I need the names. Who are the names going to be? I'll give you some names as an example. Okay, no, we're not going there. We're not going for youth yet. We're going for Victor Osimhen is a name that I've been heard a few times. I've heard his agent say Arsenal, and you've always had the reports of Osimhen at Arsenal. I think Arsenal actually could have signed him under Arsene Wenger's time.
We were linked with Arsene Wenger's time with him and Samuel Chukwueze as well. When you go back, so you
got Victor Osimhen, you've got Dusan Vlahovic as well. I know that he was Mikel Arteta's first centre forward target, if I'm right in saying he was the go-to. So there must be a profile there. Yeah. That Mikel Arteta wanted, to why we might go for that type of profile again.
Well, when you look through the history of our targets, let's say, regardless of whether you thought links were adamant or not, but Dominic Calvert-Lewin, Tammy Abraham, Dusan Vlahovic, all a very particular profile prior to the selection of Gabriel Jesus. And not to say that, Jesus is a bad player, but it certainly was an opportunistic signing, I would say, as opposed to maybe philosophy. And maybe the broader question is, let's ask, why is it that these physical nines are actually making a presence in football? Because when you start to go through every single world football team, when you look at, it's not just Harry Kane, but when you mention Evan Ferguson, Benjamin Sesko, these are the new modern type of nines. But then you start to look at the league in general about what people are wanting. Erling Haaland, when you start looking at Victor Osimhen, Darwin Nunez, by the way, not all of varying qualities, but these are all strong physical nines that like to run the channels and are able to hold up play to a certain varying degree. Ivan Toney, another player that people seem to love and who is going with 20, Premier League goals right now. Like, these are the type of strikers that are succeeding in world football, and you have to ask yourself why. Football goes in phases. There was a false nine phase for many years, and I think that we're making a return to the complete nine, because what we're going to be seeing from a lot of teams are these really nasty low blocks to combat these kind of City and Arsenals who just like to squeeze the play. And when you add players in the box and you add more people deep in your own penalty box, you need players that can move them. You need a big body that can move players around to create space for others. And sometimes that can be through movement, but more often than not, if you've got more bodies in the box, you need somebody to really make a battering ram, in a sense, and just get it in there, stick it on his head. You need that dynamic in your team in order to succeed. And so when you talk about some of the names, Victor Osimhen is definitely a superstar on the lips of everybody for very good reason. For me, he is the best number 9 in world football right now. I appreciate Erling Haaland and his potency, but when I look at Victor Osimhen's ability and his channel running, absolutely, I think that this is a boy, with given the right platform, is going to compete with Erling Haaland as one of the most complete nines on the planet. He is a guy that has moved prime Virgil van Dijk around. He is somebody that likes to channel run. He can have the aerial ability to compete in a sense, where Haaland is more of somebody that likes to latch on to chances and finish them. Osimhen is a bit more of a mover. He is somebody that will go wide a little bit more. He is somebody that has a little bit of a bigger aerial presence. I think Erling Haaland has a bit more composure than Victor Osimhen in the box, and even abroad, by the way. But I think Victor Osimhen does more between the boxes and Erling Haaland does more in the box. That is right now the difference between the two strikers. But when you look at what we may need in the future and what the team might need in the future, maybe you need a little bit more of what Jesus gives us in the fluidity of attacks and rotations, because we don't want to lose that. But we do need somebody that has the aerial presence that can occupy people, and Victor Osimhen is that in spades.
I just wanted to say that something, jumping off what George was saying, if you look at the positioning and the way we're attacking the box at the moment, we're sometimes moved to a 2-2-6, but we're normally crashing the box with our 2-8s in their positions, with our number 9 occupying the 2 centre-backs, and the ball often gets cut back to the 8s. I'm sure people have seen those screenshots going around Twitter. If you had a 6'4" centre forward who can properly occupy those centre backs, as opposed to a slightly different profile in Jesus, you increase that potency of that thing. Someone who can cut across the box, someone who can. Rasmus Højlund's really good at it, arriving at the right time in the box. Again, these are all. I'm not saying these are the right people. I'm just pointing out profiles and what we should be looking for.
Okay, so I'll give you two both an opportunity here, and I know George's answer already is Victor Osimhen. One striker that Arsenal could sign and should sign in this transfer window.
But could and should are very different.
Okay, should sign. I'll make it easier for you. Should sign.
Should sign. Yes. Well, I think if we look at the makeup of the squad, I don't think, even if we had the money to sign a Victor Osimhen or something, he'd want to start every single game, and I don't think that's best for us, because I actually think we're not ready quite yet as a team, as a chance creating machine in the way that City were a couple of last year, and then added that on. I don't think we're ready for that. So for me, I'll probably go back to it. Evan Ferguson's just signed a new contract. I'd like to see. I'll get off the fence in a second. I'd like to see like a teenager / early 20s tall forward. I probably would choose between Sesko and Højlund, are the two in mind. I don't love Højlund. I'll be honest. I think he's got a lot to learn in build up. I think he's a little bit rough around the edges. But maybe that, look, Arteta's, if there's anyone who can improve players, it's Arteta. So I'm looking more for raw profile. And in terms of the raw profile of a Højlund, in terms of his height, his power, his acceleration, his striking instincts, Evan Ferguson is the most complete profile that we could get, but I don't think we will get him. So Evan Ferguson in Dreamland and probably Rasmus Højlund in reality.
Are we against the idea of Dusan Vlahovic? Because he may be available and Juve might want to sell him. We're talking probably here 50, 60 million euros. It's affordable. It's expensive, but it's affordable. Are we against the idea of Vlahovic at the Emirates?
I'm against the idea of his movement. If you're going to analyze the type of strikers, you're going to put them in very different categories. I think that Dusan Vlahovic, I made the kind of comparison on Twitter that he is a 2014 Harry Kane. He is a type of player that is going to drop in, turn to face play, but he will not kind of release passes creatively like a Ivan Toney. He is somebody that will come, drop in, make a 1-2 touch dink, and then explode into space. He is that type of striker. If you're looking for somebody that wants to interchange more in wide spaces that can fill in as part of the front five, when you talk of Jesus, I think one of the biggest things that is a benefit to him is not just being an outlet, but his ability to fill in left, right, in wide channels and operate as one of the front five in the widest areas, or come inside and occupy himself in the box. That is not Dusan Vlahovic. Dusan Vlahovic is very much a player in between the 6-yard box. That is his kind of zone vertically, if you really was to look at it. He can drop deep, but he's very much a central kind of player. He doesn't quite have that kind of playmaking ability that, Harry Kane developed a lot later on. Could he develop it? Perhaps. I just think that he's a little bit more of kind of this physical monster that relies on 1-2 touch releases and other people around him to make the space for him to crash into. Now, do I think that striker is moot? No, like they have their uses, but for me, I do want a striker that has a little bit more flexibility, that can do those things, but can also operate in wide channels to allow our brilliant wide men, who are the kind of secret sauce to our season and will be the secret sauce to our success, more chances of coming inside, being closer to goal. That for me is kind of a more urgent pick. I think Dusan Vlahovic is going to have a better price than some of the ones that we've mentioned. When you talk about Evan Ferguson, Victor Osimhen, we know the prices, we know the feasibility. These are targets that are probably the most money because they're the most desirable.
Thanks for checking out the Canon podcast. To get full episodes and access to exclusive benefits, head over to patreon.com/thecannonpod and sign up for just £3 a month.